All right. All right. I think we are live. I'm just double checking here. It takes a minute sometimes to click in. Yep. All right. All right. So we are live today. Thank you guys for joining. I want to make sure that I get my comment section up here so I can see, so I don't have to look back and forth at my phone. But here we go. Perfect. All right. Thank you guys for joining today for my Leading Ladies webinar. You all know I do Sound Off Saturdays, and most of my Sound Off Saturdays they're very informal. You know, it's just me talking about topics, my opinion, what I feel. But a few months back, I decided to dedicate the third Saturday of every month to a series I had been working on called Leading Ladies. So I've been working through different areas. I've done ministry. We've done small business ownership. We've done healthcare. And today we are doing education. And I'm so excited because obviously I'm in education currently, but I have two awesome and brilliant educators here with me, and they also happen to be administrators in education and have administrative experience, which is leadership in and of itself. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Miss Margina Cohen. She is a classmate of mine from back home in Michigan, and she has experience in education in administration as well. And then we have Miss Shauna Berry here, who is a sorority sister of mine, who's out here in this DMV area, and she is an administrator as well. So today we are going to be talking about education. And of course, we know education is in a very interesting phase right now, where we know virtual learning is not new, but it's definitely something that people were kind of thrust into before they were prepared for it. And so a lot of things in education, there are so many moving parts right now. People are trying to figure everything out as it goes. And there have been a lot of successes. There have been some challenges. And of course, now with the pandemic and numbers ticking up, we don't know what may happen. Some schools have opened to only close. Some schools were preparing to open and now they're on the edge. But there are some topics, some discussions that I think are consistent in education that we're going to talk about today, whether we are doing learning virtually or whether we're in a building. So that's what we're going to be discussing and talking about. And so when I ask the questions, when I start with this first question, Margina and Shauna, if you want to give a little bit of your background and or what you do now, you can do that there. I'll let you formally introduce yourself because I don't want to miss any information and give the wrong information. How about that? Right. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, again, thank you for joining me. If you have any comments or questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'll try to get to them, but I definitely don't want to keep these ladies super duper long. But I will try to incorporate them into what we discussed today. Okay. All right. So here we go with our first question. So when did you begin your educational career? And how did you determine that this was kind of the right path for you or the path for you? So I'll start with Margina, if we're okay with that.
Yep. I got into education back in 2008 by happenstance. Had no desire to be an educator, had no qualms about being a teacher at all. But life happened. And I went through a very messy divorce, and I had 3 children, all underneath the ages of 7. And what I noticed was that I quickly was able to ascertain that I was working just to pay for daycare. So, and I wasn't on the same schedule with my kids. So what happened was that the church I was attending at the time, one of my church members was a parent liaison, I think, with National Heritage Academies. And a parapro position became available. And she was just like, do you want to take this position? And I'm like, they don't get paid no money. But I will be able to be at least on the same schedule with my kids. What happened was fate. And I ended up with a team of people who ended up being like family. And the hiring principal, he ended up being my mentor. And he told me, hey, bring your kids over here to the school so you can keep an eye on them and keep them close to you, which was a blessing.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, that did wonders for everybody.
Right.
So I was still a parapro, and he brought me in his office one day, and he was just like, you know what, you can do this. You need to go back to school, get your master's in education. He was just like, let this company pay for it. And he was like, and I'll help you. And I was just like, okay, I don't even know what that looks like. But what he did was he allowed me to do my student teaching there at the school that I was actually working at. So I was still able to get a paycheck. I was able to do my homework there. It all just worked out. And I ended up loving what I did because I went straight into middle school. I'm one of those weird people that like middle school. I don't like little kids.
Y'all have something in common.
The kids like to touch you. It's just like, so I stayed in middle school. And I loved it. I loved what I did. I was good at it, and I made a career out of it. And I went from parapro to principal in 7 years. So I grew quick.
Wow.
So, yep, that's how I got here. And currently I'm a consultant. I'm an educational consultant. Got out of administration about 2 years ago and decided to start my own company because I had put my 10,000 hours in. Shout out to Malcolm Gladwell. So I felt like I was an expert. I was an expert in my field, especially middle school. Mm-hmm. So I took that, became a consultant, and I definitely love this life with the flexible schedule and all that good stuff. So administration may be my future down the road, but as for right now, I'm good.
Awesome. Same question for you, Shauna.
Okay, first of all, let me just say that Margina is part of my tribe. Not everyone loves middle school.
Yes, ma'am.
Middle school is definitely my heart.
Yep.
So I began my journey in education back in probably 1995, 1996. I was still in college. And from the time I was in third grade, I knew, like, you couldn't tell me anything differently, but I was going to be a lawyer.
Mm.
So when I went to college, I went as a political science major. Mm-hmm. And one semester, it was probably my sophomore year, I had to take an extra class to fill up my schedule. And I ended up taking an education class of all things. And I actually had to go out into the school to observe teachers in different environments. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like I think I want to do this. Uh-huh. So I had to tell my parents that I was changing my major. And that's how it all began. I became a secondary social sciences major at the Alabama State University.
All right.
Go Hornets. And it's just kind of been education ever since then. I started off working in Montgomery, Alabama, in a middle school, or there it's a junior high school. Uh-huh. And came here and began actually working in a elementary school, which I do believe made me a much better middle school teacher.
I'm sure.
I taught 6th grade, all subjects in an elementary school. And like I said, I do believe it really made me a better middle school teacher. Uh-huh. And now I've been at my present school for, I do believe this is year 15. It's too many to count.
Wow.
Right. You can tell I love it, right? So I started off there as a reading specialist back in 2006. And I have been there ever since, and now I'm the assistant principal.
Yay.
Awesome. And Margina, you need to shout out to her alma mater here.
I was about to say, are all three of us HBCU grads?
This is an HBCU grad education series here. Yes.
Shout out to the mighty, the Jackson State University. Sign the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
You in the SWAC.
Coach Prime.
Time and time again, proving, as we have always been saying. I know some people are just saying it now because of current events, but HBCUs are not inferior. to any other universities and or institutions.
Absolutely.
Our people, our graduates have gone on to do great things and change the world just like any and everyone else. So shout out to HBCUs. Here's that.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, so let's keep going. So this question, I'll start with Shauna for this one. What are the challenges, or what are some challenges you think with being a Black woman in leadership in education? Some challenges that you see or face yourself?
That is actually a very interesting question, because I am going to come at it from a different angle. Mm-hmm. Because most of my career has been spent in Prince George's County, Maryland, mm-hmm. which is it has a very high minority population, mm-hmm. And somewhat affluent. Although it's interesting. I'll say that. Because there are definitely the haves, and then there are serious have-nots.
Absolutely.
But as a Black woman, I can honestly say that I have not experienced anything that I felt hindered me because of my race or my gender.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it's kind of been the opposite, in that because I felt like because I was a Black woman, I got pushed to do bigger and better things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
In my district I don't necessarily think it's unique, but we are led by a Black woman who was a homegrown Black woman, mm-hmm. who was a product of the school system and came back and worked in it.
Yep.
And the culture for this particular district it elevates, I think, women. Absolutely. And especially women of color. So in my, I will call it my adult, because I don't call my first couple of years of teaching, I was still a baby. I don't yeah. But in my adult years of being an educator, uh-huh. I cannot say that I have had any experiences where my gender or my race were a negative or held me back from anything.
Right. And that's excellent. And I know that like you said, PG County, and we all know PG County in the DMV area. I know many, 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 many women, Black women specifically, that are thriving in PG County in education. Absolutely. But definitely in leadership, period. It's definitely an area where I can see and feel that there is a push and a drive, and mm-hmm. I know that, of course, that's not the same everywhere. But it is a very unique situation and one that, many others have not experienced. So what about you, Margina? What are some of the maybe challenges that you have faced or see, in your roles?
My immediate answer mirrors Shauna's. Like, I felt like I was definitely pushed. Mm-hmm. The competency and the capacity was recognized. So it was just like, okay, let's build her up. Awesome. But it was also built up by other people of color. And then when and that was the majority of the culture that I was dealing with, the majority of the schools that I've been in. I will say, like, most of the challenges were culturally from other Black people. And I'm not necessarily saying a negative thing, but it was just culturally because I was a young administrator. So most of my parents were either my age, they were my peers, or they were older than me. So initially, getting to know me, it was definitely a process because there was some trust that had to be established there. There was rapport that had to be established there because it really was like, who are you to tell me, about what's going on with my kid, especially if it's a disciplinarian. If we're operating in the role of a disciplinarian, like I just was not very readily accepted until it was just like, okay, well, you actually, I did definitely have to prove myself.
Sure.
And that's probably the biggest that I can remember, the biggest challenge that I had. But as far as like being in rooms, no, I led.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's really good to hear, because, sometimes all we do hear are the challenges, but again, like you said, there are some very unique experiences where, it's not just that our voices are heard, but we are pushed more, and we have those around us that are pushing us, because somebody pushed them, and we feel comfortable in those spaces. And I definitely share that sentiment. There are times when, we can be hard on each other.
Yep.
For a lot of different reasons. But I do think, in a more genuine way, I think sometimes it's looked at because people just want to see you succeed, and maybe somebody didn't do that for them, and they would, even if it comes across harsh, they would rather kind of prepare you for, possible backlash or whatever else, as opposed to you not being prepared. So, it works out in the end. It's uncomfortable when you're going through it in the beginning. It's like, wait a minute now, are we not on the same team? Okay, nope, we not on the same team. All right, get your head in the game. You gotta work your way up here. So absolutely. This question right here, I have thought long and hard about this question, and the reason I picked this question is because I was having a conversation with an educator about this. So I would love to hear you all's perspective. And I'm going to answer a little bit after you all. And I'm going to start with Margina. What do you think is an underutilized resource in education? And it could be literally something, or it could be a position, like a person or a position that's kind of underutilized in education.
I definitely think integrated health and wellness. I think that it was missing. That was a big chunk that was missing prior to the pandemic. I think that it's still missing universally within schools right now, and it's just needed. But I think it's needed for all stakeholders. I think it's needed for students. I think it's needed for families. I definitely know it's needed for staff. Yeah. That we have to pay attention to mental health. We can't ignore that anymore. We can't not talk about it or sweep it up under the rug, but we have to teach coping skills. We have to teach definite mental strategies. We have to do something different other than, everything's punitive. We got to teach kids how to sit in their feelings and process and work through that. And I just think that because I see a lot of the things that I've done as a teacher, where I was just like, what, if we had somebody on staff that could have just talked me through this, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And a lot of times, when you're dealing with kids, when they are dealing with issues that we may not readily recognize or be able to identify as a mental health issue, even the most patient teacher, you still need help. And I think all the times that, we winged this. It's just like, you caught a problem at the door. We use a lot of preventative methods, but other than, treating, it was so many times that I think about that, we're stuck. Like, what do we do? When there's obvious trauma there, there's obvious, lack of resilience there, that needs to be tended to emotionally. And I think that we lack, what's the word am I looking for? Developing emotional intelligence among our leaders, amongst our teachers, our families, just teaching them that. And that was something that I had to learn. I mean, I was good I wasn't even administrator anymore. I was an educational consultant at the time when I actually learned how to be an emotionally intelligent leader. Because before that, it's so easy to take stuff personally when wrong, or when somebody does something wrong. And then to be emotionally intelligent and take a step back and say, this ain't even about me. There's something going on with you that I need to empathize with. I don't necessarily need to get angry or upset about, because it's not about me. Right. So, and I just think that is what is hugely, it's not directly connected to education, but it needs to be.
Oh, it definitely is.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, the lack of connection.
You're right, Shauna.
It's definitely there.
Shauna, you can go ahead. You can answer that question too.
Okay. But I'm just going to piggyback on Margina and just say I completely agree with that, because in the how many months have we been doing virtual learning now? Since the spring. It feels like almost a whole calendar year.
Right.
But I feel like I have had to be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist for not just the kids, not just their parents, and not just the staff, but it's like everybody needs this. So I definitely concur with you on building that whole emotional intelligence, not just for the leaders, but for everybody. Everybody has it's needed.
Yeah.
But for my answer for the underutilized, I'm gonna go with the assistant principal position. Because typically when someone becomes an assistant principal, it is because someone somewhere has seen them be good at what it is that they have done, and they're like, okay, it's time for you to take this next step.
Sure.
And a lot of times I feel like our expertise as educators, as teachers, is far underutilized, because we spend so much time handling discipline and handling building issues and things of that nature, that it is easy, if you allow it. It is very easy to forget that you are also a teacher. I will, and I have always been and will always be a teacher first.
Yes.
First.
Yes.
So but I do believe that because of the way that education is set up right now, I don't get to be that teacher a lot of the times the way I would like to be, because I'm too busy filling out this form, or handling this child, or talking this parent off a cliff, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I definitely believe the assistant principal position as a whole is underutilized.
Yeah. I would agree. I definitely would agree with those. I definitely was thinking that our school counselors, I think, are underutilized for the same reasons that Margina brought up. I mean, we have people in our buildings that have degrees and in psychology, psychiatry. These people are well versed in trauma, and there's so much, and I know, I'm looking at it from a lens too of an elementary perspective, where a lot of the lessons have to be very craftily put together, because we're dealing with little children. We don't know what their exposure is. But my very first education experience was in a school for students with emotional disabilities. And one thing that I absolutely loved about that school, despite the spontaneous things that happen, because I am trying to tell you, I can write a book. I need to write a book. But was our
contribute.
Listen, I need some forwards. I need all kind of things to go with the book. But the thing I loved most about that school was our trauma team. And our trauma team, I mean, obviously we had a trauma team because of the nature of the school that we were at. And there were times where things could escalate from just somebody screaming to it getting extremely violent and we having to evacuate. So you have to have things in place at those kind of schools. But that trauma team was filled with people, I'm talking about, that could diffuse a bomb. I mean, all of their skills pulled together were incredible. I mean, you're talking about, that team was full of counselors. It was full of, other mental health professionals, and those were available to the students. And I just kept thinking, a lot of times when I was there, what if a team like this existed in the base schools, before a child comes to this kind of school? Think about how many kids would not necessarily need to transfer to those specific situations if they had just had that. Now, you're always going to have, you're always going to have exceptions, but in thinking about everything that we did, I just said, golly, every kid needs this, every kid, like you said, sometimes problems that hit you right at the door when a kid comes in the building, right away what kind of day, what time it is with John, as soon as he gets to school, and then there are times when you don't know where maybe it didn't hit right away, but something triggered it in the middle of the day or in a classroom discussion. So I definitely agree that our school counselors, by way of some type of trauma team, not a trauma team per se, but just a team of our counselors, mental health professionals, different things. And I know a lot of schools, given our current situation, have been looking into that and they're developing it. I just think in a lot of ways we are like light years behind when it comes to that. And so we'll see the effects of it for the babies coming up. But those who have already been matriculating, we're retro with them as opposed to, being proactive. So
yeah.
Oh, that's the word right there. Proactive.
Yeah. But we've seen it and we know it's going to happen. We've seen it in other settings. We just now have to deal with it in education, so absolutely. All right. This next question is kind of personal, and I know you cannot use names, so I'm not asking you to share a name. What'd you say?
Purpa.
Oh, right. Give an example of, how you've seen a student or a family overcome a challenge and how it impacted you in your career as an educator and what you do. So I'll go with Margina.
This had to be my first classroom. My first classroom as a teacher. It was a gentleman, a young guy. He was in 8th grade, and he was just that kid that would just take you there. It was like, and it's almost like he enjoyed taking you there, right? Mm-hmm. So we still, I had a co-teacher who's still a good friend of mine. We would combine our classes, and probably like once every quarter, we would take out time and just, give the kids affirmations. Mm-hmm. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you just did. I don't care if you just did something an hour ago. I was going to find a reason to affirm you, something. And it had to be genuine. And what we did was that we modeled that, but then we taught the kids how to do it with each other. Right. Mm-hmm. So we were thinking that this was just a good way to build relationships, get to know the kids to get to know us. And didn't realize how big of an impact it had until probably the end of the year. And the kids were about to graduate. And this young man, he stood up at graduation and he said, I just want to affirm Miss Parker. My last name was Parker at the time. Mm-hmm. And he says, you know what, no matter what I did, he said, you never allowed it to affect our relationship. He said, I could always come back the next day and I had a clean slate with you. And he was just like, and I just really, really appreciate that. He said, because it felt like, it felt like love. And, I'm thinking, I'm not thinking I'm loving on anybody. I'm just thinking, Margina, like, I'm a talker. I like to get to know people. I like, I'm a person or whatever. But I end up seeing a young man at the airport. He's grown now. And he walked up to me, looks exactly the same. And he works at the airport. He was like, you remember me? I'm like, how could I forget you? Right. And just knowing then that how impactful relationships are. And you got to start with relationships. And so far, and so often, especially within turnaround schools, because bulk of my experience has been within turnaround entities. They always want to hurry up and jet set to the academic lift. And it was just like, no, you got to get this climate and culture straight first. Right. If the babies don't know how to sit down, they ain't going to learn. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right. And that starts with relationships. And you have to be intentional about it. You have to be purposeful about it. And you have to commit to the time that it's going to take. So we all know it takes 3 to 5 years to turn the school around. You need about a good 2 to 3 years to turn that climate around, because we have to build relationships, not only with our kids, but we've got to build relationships with the families. And that was just one example of where I was just like, and I'm not a crier, I'm a thug. That was one of the times where I was just like, oh, you about to make this thug cry. Like,
oh, that broke me down. About to break me down.
Broke me down. But yeah, definitely stuck with me and made me realize, like, okay, girl, you doing something right.
Yep. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Shauna, what about you?
Shout out to the thugs. I'm a crier. I'm gonna talk stuff, but I'm a crier.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll cry too.
Oh goodness. So it's funny because my story is about a young man as well. So my school is actually a K-8 school. Mm-hmm. So, and I really love that aspect of it because we get to be with families for years, especially when they have multiple children.
Right.
So this one particular young man is, he has an older sibling. She's like 2 years older than him, but he, as a kindergartner, first grader, and second grader, that baby struggled academically and socially. But you know how, like, we're not supposed to just diagnose children but we've been in the game long enough to know, like, that baby has ADHD. And while I am not a proponent of medicating children by any means, I will say this particular case made me more aware of the fact that it can help. It absolutely can help, because this baby finally got diagnosed in third grade. Third grade was a phenomenal year for him.
Wow.
However, he was still dealing with the perceptions of who he was in those previous years. Sure. And not necessarily that the teachers were holding it against him, but his peers remembered how he used to be. And he remembered how he used to be. So he came to me one day and he was like, Miss Berry, I know how I used to be, but I know I missed a lot of learning because of my behavior before, but now he was like, I just want to learn everything I can. Aww. I said, well, guess what? You can do it. So he spent third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and now as a first year middle school student, he has done a complete 180. He is a conscientious student. He is mindful of his behavior, and he knows when he needs to be like, okay, y'all, 1 minute, I'll be right back. And he'll come and take a walk, come to the office, and just sit in my office. Sometimes he doesn't even have to say anything. He'll just sit in the chair and just be like, okay, I'm good. Can you write me a pass to go back to class? But because of him, I learned that, we can never give up on our kids.
Yeah.
Because he is one that would have been really, really easy to throw away. He would have been real easy to throw away. But because we didn't, and because we allow him that time to be able to make that shift that he needed to make, he is now one of our top students. And I'm about to get emotional. Here. Because he has done a phenomenal job of being self-aware and of changing his situation.
That's awesome.
And I think both of you said this. You said it specifically, and Margina, you said it just in your example. We don't often give kids enough time to work through things. And I know some of that time is not us. It's educational standards that are stomping on our shoulders and our heads all day, telling us these kids got to move. These kids got to move. We got to achieve this. We got to get them ready for this. Got to get them ready for that. But we don't often give them time. There are some kids. I'm gonna tell you something. I've been saying this for years, and I really do mean it. I did choose special education, but I felt like it more so chose me the more I go along the way. And I tell everybody that I work with, I'm in special education because I want to help kids that need to get the services to get the services. But I also want to help kids who do not need these services, but they just need time or an educator that actually is going to take some time and care about them and do what they need to do. I want to help that process too, because I do feel like from my perspective, there are times when we over-identify kids because educators are scared of what scores and things are going to look like. And it helps you if this kid is over here with this disability, so to speak. So, I know from that lens, I'm always trying to look at, we don't give a lot of these kids enough time.
I agree.
There are some grades that are very hard to transition from. From an elementary perspective, our hardest grades to transition between second and third grade. They go from being babies to what is the author's purpose? And there is no in between for them. And they're like, the author's purpose? I just thought people wrote books for fun. And you can see it. You can see it on their face. You can see the shift. And then that's when you start to see who who can make that transition of, okay, now I am not learning to read, but I'm reading to learn. Like, that's a big shift for them. And just overall, I do think we don't give enough kids time to process through certain things. And then, like you said, Shauna, you're talking about a kid that is really struggling for whatever reason. And we find something that works. Whether that is medication, whether it's therapy, whether it's just time, whatever it is, and you find something that works, and then look at the success that a kid can have once you find what works. Mm-hmm. Once you give them the tools that they actually need to be successful.
Yep.
Like, look what happens. I mean, my story in this is just super duper quick. Same school. The first school I worked at for students with emotional disabilities. So this school was traditionally it was 6 through 12. They didn't have K-5 when I first arrived at the school because of just the way the county was set up. But as the years went on, they found that there were more and more challenges at the elementary level. So they start bringing in younger kids. And now I was like, oh, God, this is making me sad. Like, seeing babies at a school for students with emotional disability, like, what is really going on here? But when I was pregnant with the twins, and this is when I was working there, a situation popped off in my classroom, which it often did. And I typically always had a room full of boys, and I always had one girl in every class. It was a whole room full of boys and one girl in the background. Something popped off, and a student of mine who had been just kind of like a hard case to crack, so to speak. He was one of those kids that he was just really hard to figure out all year. I saw a completely different side of him when something popped off. Something popped off and he went into full protection mode, finding every way to protect me and get me out of the situation because a fight was happening and I was pregnant. And in that moment, all he was concerned about were these babies and Miss Galt. And I was like, is this the same? I just, like, my mind was blown. Not that I didn't think he was a kid that couldn't care about anyone else, but I saw a completely different side of him that day that I had never seen before. And then once we tapped into that sensitivity of his, and we worked on that, he was almost a completely different student after that. Yep. I just, and again, it just goes to show that when you finally crack the code, or you finally give the kids the actual tools that's going to work for them, what can really change for them and for you. And I was just tickled. I said, oh my goodness, Charles is overprotective of these unborn babies. He doesn't even know, and we didn't even realize that there were some things from his past that ended up coming out later that kind of helped explain that situation. And then, like I said, once we knew, we took that information, we ran with it. It was like, okay, here's the blue book for what we're going to do for him on this and on this and on this. And from that point on until he left, because he ended up leaving the school actually prematurely, he ended up moving. From then until he left, he was just on such a good path. in a very successful path. He was really making some progress that he wasn't even making when he was in therapy. He was making the better progress in the building with our team. So I just, kids are
that took it took time.
It took time and it took work. And if you don't want to put in the work and you don't want to put in the time, then
you're in the wrong profession.
Right, you're in the wrong profession.
Well,
and I say it all the time.
You're in the wrong.
You like kids? Like, why are you here?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole. you open the door here. That's a whole.
Yes, ma'am.
I just hope that all the people who realize it quick, and and get out before they feel like they're too vested or they don't have any other skills and they can't leave, because then those become the educators that our kids talk about all the time, are the ones that did them wrong and didn't really help them, as opposed to the ones who did make a difference. So
the ones that scar them for life.
Yep. Those are the ones that stick right here. First names pop in your head.
Yep.
Now, this question, I think we kind of answered already, but I kind of slid it in. Like, if you had to give a new educator one thing for classroom management, so one very important thing for classroom management, because that is something that is lacking.
Right.
What would it be? What would it be? Shauna, I'll start with you. Like one, the classroom management is a course in and of itself. But if you had to give them a starting point, something that is of the utmost importance for classroom management.
One of the easiest but hardest things to do is just, I'll go back to what Margina said, building relationships. Children, and I don't care what age level they are, they know when you don't like them.
Yeah.
They know when you have given up on them. And they know when you could care less about whatever it is to do. Even if your actions might sometimes say differently, they know. So taking the time to build those relationships with them, I think goes much further than anything Harry Long or anybody else could have said to talk about classroom management. Children, just like that young man that was trying to protect you, because you had, I'm certain, had taken the time to build relationships, even if he wasn't necessarily receptive to it.
Right.
You had established a relationship with him. And he knew that in a moment where his and your safety could have been in jeopardy, he was going to try to make sure that you were okay.
Right. And
for me, and that has always been my thing, even my first year as a teacher, if you can build those relationships, then that makes everything else go smoother, because they're less likely to want to disappoint you when they know that you care about them.
Right. I agree. Margina?
Sorry, y'all, my puppy got the barking.
Oh, that's okay.
Definitely, I just, fall back on relationships, put the curriculum to the side, on a consistent basis. Like, it can't just be something that you visit the first 2 weeks of school after breaks, but on a consistent basis, provide the opportunity for your students to be appropriately transparent with you, and you reciprocate. You be appropriately transparent with them. I always say, if I can give you a little piece of me, that's just not all the way in my business, allow you to see my humanity, because I always tell kids, I was just like, I'm human just like you are. I get my feelings hurt. I get tired. I'm hungry, just like y'all are around lunchtime. I get grouchy,
right?
And I'm not always right.
Right. And we're not, you took the words out my mouth, Shauna.
I'm sorry, here you go, girl.
I think the consistent trend I have seen with effective educators, and that's from support staff on up to, the superintendent's office, central office with the district, is being able to admit when you're wrong and apologize.
Yep.
And I think that, especially educators, because we are educated people, you know, we are smart or whatever. We get that sage on stage mentality, like can't nobody tell us nothing. And I'm the ultimate expert in the room. Sit your butt down and be the coach for a minute and just observe. See what's going on and allow your students to teach you something, because we don't know that we know enough, that we don't know everything. So that relationship part is just so critical, and it's so it's kind of like you know, people think that they can take it or leave it or whatever. Right. You really can't, because you're going to end up playing catch up. You're going to wish you had a and it's so integral in so many other parts, because the student that has a relationship with you, when they are wrong, they are more apt to receive redirection from you. Right. And let's talk about that with the parents too. If you know that Mrs. Cohen actually cares, you know what I'm saying? Right. Deep down inside of me, I actually give a damn or whatever. Then you're not going to fight me tooth and nail when it comes down to if I need to redirect, or if we need to have a conversation about grades or whatever, because you know that that's rooted in love, and it has nothing to do with, you know, oh, the curriculum says that it's got to be this way, it's got to be that way. Right. When we build relationships, that's when we see genius.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that is a sweet spot.
Oh, but that relationship with the parent piece is hugely critical for classroom management purposes as well.
Yeah.
Because when I as an educator have more pull or leeway with your child than you do, but I've been in that situation where I've been in a parent teacher conference, and the student is being extremely respectful of me, but rolling their eyes and doing stuff to their parent, and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. No,
never do that to your mom in front of me.
No, she's the one who clothes you and feeds you. Nope. I just teach you. That's not right. You gotta get that together, young person.
Right. Right.
Tell them, assistant principal Bear.
I mean, it's very similar. I mean, like you're saying, relationships, you're talking about buy-in. It's like, you know, I heard somebody use this analogy, and I had never thought about it, like business. You know, like business and clients, like these are our clients. They need buy-in so that they can stay, so that they will keep coming back, so that they will appreciate, you know, like you have to have that sense of community, you know, like they feel like they belong here, and you do that relationship. Not, you know, everyone doesn't respond to just this kind of authoritarian model with people that have to respond, you know, like the military, so to speak, you know. And we see now, you know, just the trend with children. I feel, and I say this all the time, even as it relates to church, when I'm talking to how to handle our youth of today or whatever, we have to have relationships. I know that people don't like to hear this, but a lot of those generations of do as I say, just because I'm an adult, those kids they're us. And we're up here in age now. These kids now, a lot of these kids don't listen to anybody that they don't have a relationship with. Nope. And whether we like it or not that's water under the bridge, but that's where we are. So if you're going to get a kid to follow you, so to speak, or do what you want them to do, you have to have a relationship with them. And you have to realize that's just where we are. And that's the times that we're in. Kids are not just listening to somebody yelling at them down the street to pick up that paper you just threw or whatever. They're like, who are you talking to?
Exactly.
Even if it's somebody that look like their grandma, they're not responding to that. But if they know Miss Donna, they know Miss Donna don't play, and they don't walk past Miss Donna's house and chuck something on her gun, and she look, excuse me, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Donna, and they pick it up and they keep on going. You know, it really is. Relationships are beyond important, obviously, because we're relational beings. We're meant to relate to each other anyway, not live on these individual islands and never check in with each other. But it also teaches responsibility, and it teaches community. I mean, Margina, like you said, we're trying to teach them. So telling a kid that you're sorry, apologizing, owning up to your mistake, that teaches them to be a better person when they're outside of that classroom.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And they're going to do it because we did it as an example, not because somebody told them, but because they saw it happen.
and then model accountability.
Absolutely.
And how many times have we, as educators, been like, y'all just don't know how to be accountable enough? Just,
right.
You know, as adults in my regular life, you know, I seek accountability. I don't seek perfection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if you are willing to say, you know what, I apologize that I was wrong. You know what I'm saying? Think about where we would be, you know, period. Just as
we normalize that.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we normalize accountability?
Yeah. Look at where we are now in the United States with accountability. 17, 18 days after a presidential election, you're talking about accountability. We're talking about people who won't stand up to one person. We're talking about people who are trying to quietly leave and quietly resign and not hold people accountable. Accountability is a big problem.
Yep.
And we got to deal with it with these kids because they are the next people that's going to occupy the Congress and you know, and the Senate and the White House and all these different other arenas. And we can't continue to, I can't get worked up. I can't get worked up. Talking about one thing here, but I'm saying
come on back.
We are lacking accountability. And we got to start with the baby. So, all right. So I move on. All right. So next question, 2 more questions. What are some common misconceptions about your specific position? And Margina, I want to start with you as a consultant because I've had some really good conversations with different consultants in our division, even outside of our division. And then, you know, there are some people that are like, what do we need these consultants for? Blah, 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 blah. So what are some misconceptions about your specific, you know, position?
So normally in my role as a consultant, I come in to do instructional coaching, and I've actually merged into leadership coaching. So I've been training principals and superintendents in some districts. And normally, but these are turnaround districts. So of course, again, the bulk of my expertise has been built in the turnaround environment, right? So turnaround schools are sick. So the biggest misconception is, why are you here? I'm here because you're sick, and I want to be able to alleviate that for you. Right. The second biggest misconception is that I'm here to eliminate or take your job. And I always have to, again, build a relationship, only to come circle back and say, you know what, you know, pull you over to the side, or we may have to, you know, go have an adult beverage after work or whatever. And, you know, and just plainly say, hey, I've done that before. I don't want to do that. I don't want to sit in that seat any longer. Right. You know, I really want to see you become the best you. And my job is worthless if I don't develop you. Right. So come on over. You know what I'm saying? I always tell my colleague, because we always encounter just challenging, I won't say challenging people, but rather challenging personalities. Because what the bulk of our job is going in and building systems, routines, processes, and stuff like that people just have never considered before. But you know, again, 10,000 hours, I know a little something about best practices or whatever, and just getting people to listen to you and understand that, you know, I have your best interests in mind. And I always tell my colleague, she'd be like, you know, can we work with them? Do you think it's possible? And I'm like, girl, we beat makers. We can make anybody hot.
Yeah.
We can make anybody hot. And that's what we do. But I think that people are just hesitant naturally. I think it's just, I don't think anything dealing with Margina personally. I just think people are just hesitant naturally because they believe that someone has said that you're not doing a good job. Right. But I'm like, if you still here, then someone wants to help you. And that's what they're bringing me in for. If we're not having a conversation with HR, and as a principal, I used to have to say that to my instructors. I don't like to say my instructors, rather my team, my family. If I had to have a courageous conversation with you, you know, first thing, like, am I in trouble? And I'm like, are we in here with HR? This is me and you having a conversation. Right. Because I want to see you be the best you. Right. So that's kind of how we overcome that. But it is definitely something I see on a constant basis. I'm sure people that I'm not here to cut your throat.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the good thing about having a consultant, though, period, is there really are times, and I'm not just times, but you need people from the outside to be able to come in and evaluate with an unbiased perspective. Nobody wants to look at their baby and say, my baby needs X, Y, and Z. No, you need this consultant over here to tell you, okay, listen, I know you love your baby. This is what you created. This is how you develop this process. But maybe we can look at some different steps. It always helps to have that too, because sometimes people around you, they can hurt you in ways where they won't be very critical of you because they are close to you and they won't give you the real, but they in the teacher's lounge like, y'all know, John, that number 2 ain't gonna work. What we gonna do about it? But nobody want to tell John because y'all cool with John. Y'all all came up. He brought you in, all those kind of things where someone like you can come in and just cut on right to the chase, and then they could be in the background like, yeah, John, I mean, listen to Miss Cohen because she has some great ideas, without fear of whatever repercussions or anything like that. So,
but that's where also I find that really quick that I find that collaborative process is essential, because it's not me coming in telling you, pointing fingers and all that stuff. I'm actually walking you through a process. And I call it the think tank process.
Right.
Whenever we can sit down and, hey, let's talk about, okay, we know that X is wrong. This is not working. Let's talk about why it's not working, and how we can subscribe to remedying that, in the most effective way possible.
Right. Absolutely. Shauna, what about you? What are some common misconceptions about being an assistant principal? I can think of a billion, but I want to hear.
Well, I would just kind of elaborate a little bit on the one that I talked about before about us only doing discipline. Like, oh my God. That was probably one of my biggest frustrations when I first became an assistant principal. This is year 4. And my first year as the assistant principal, my school had not had an assistant principal for probably 6, 7, 8 years. For budgeting reasons. It was just, we would much rather put our money in classroom positions as opposed to administration. However, so in my mind, when I became an assistant principal, I was going to be an instructional leader, and I was going to be in everybody's collaborative planning and being able to sprinkle in my little expertise all over the place. And everything was going to be wonderful. Man, that was so not the case, because I became like, it felt like the first year I was strictly a disciplinarian, strictly.
Yeah.
And I think just now it's starting to get to a place where I can do more instructional things. But it's just the fact that, as I said before, many of us are in the position that we are in because somebody saw something in us. Yeah. They saw that we were, for me, it was a good reading teacher. And that instructional expertise would benefit the entire school. So I just, again, I want us to be able to be our full selves in the assistant principal position.
Right.
So that it's not just being seen as the disciplinarian or whatever. No, I know a little bit about instruction too. I know a little bit about counseling too. I just want to be able to be all of those things.
Right.
More often.
Discipline is draining. Oh my God.
Yes. It
takes the whole day.
And I promise you that at least 85% of the time, by the time a child has made it to my office, it was something that could have been handled right there in the classroom.
Because
somebody did not take time to build a relationship, or somebody didn't take time to listen to what the child was actually saying.
Yeah.
or trying to do. So, you know, in that culture, we're going to shift all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's back to that classroom management piece. All right, this definitely is a pretty hard question because I don't know that there's one word that could really sum up education. But if you could describe education in one word, what would that word be? And I'll start with Shauna. I'll go back to you, Shauna.
I'm a cheat. I'm gonna tell you now. I have a hyphenated word.
Oh Lord, here you go.
I was that kid.
Yep.
I'll just tell you, I was that kid. I would say it's a beautiful mess. Because there are so many, like, it's very easy to focus on the mess part. It really is easy because it can be overwhelming and very prevalent.
Right.
However, the beauty of education is when you see teachers make shifts that turn around and make shifts for their students. That is some of the most exciting stuff. When you have those students for whom the light bulb comes on and it's just like, phew, they take off. That's the beauty of education. Yeah. When parents, teachers, and students come together to fix things, that's the beauty for me of in education. The mess is everything else. All those weeds and things that we often get bogged down in. Right. That keeps us from seeing that beauty more often. So for me, it's a beautiful mess.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always easy to see the mess. I mean, but there's mess everywhere, right? It's this mess in every arena of life. You really can't escape mess. It's just a matter of, I mean, like Margina said way earlier, you know, how are you viewing it? Are you viewing it optimistically? You know, like this mess can be cleaned up. Even if you do see it, you know, like we are in a mess and I don't know how we, you know, like that point of view. I don't know what we're going to do. We can't clean it up, you know, that perspective, you know, when the mess is just like, we need to start over. I don't think we can clean it up. So Margina, what about you?
My answer actually piggybacks, kind of mirrors Shauna's. And the conversation that's being had right now, I would definitely say that my one word is unhealthy. But I don't say that with a negative connotation because I see the optimism in that and the opportunity as well. Because what we're starting to see now is that the unhealthiness has been recognized. And that is a blessing with this pandemic. Because now people are being forced to shift. You can't be a one-dimensional teacher anymore.
Nope.
You know, forget all that direct instruction. And I'm a direct learner. You know, teachers have a tendency to teach the way that they learn. Right. So forget all that direct instruction. You're going to have to figure something else out. Yeah. You have to figure out how to get your students. I love it. And this is going to sound so elitist, but I kind of don't care. That parents are frustrated right now. I appreciate that because I'm just like, okay, you can no longer be a bystander on this journey of education with your kid. You have to be an active and involved participant. And I'm not saying that you have to become you should be your child's first teacher. Let's just get that out the way. Right. However, but you have to be an active and involved participant in your child's education. And I get it. Things happen. Life happens. We're all human. Right. And as an educator, was I the best parent of my students that I gave birth to? As far as like their educational career goes, no, of course there's times when I was just like, okay, you knew better. You could have been more involved. Right. Or whatever. But I was able to reflect on that as an educator and step my game up. And I think right now that families and schools are finding that you can't get around anymore. We have to work together. Yep. We have to work together. It's got to be me and you in this game. If we're going to make this baby a contributing citizen to society and make sure that they ain't meeting nobody in their driveway at night. Right. We got to have the same objective and we have to talk to one another. Right. And it is a team process. So I definitely think it has been unhealthy, although I do think the veil has been lifted there was no other choice but to do it right now. And I think what we're starting to see now is a revolutionary and much needed shift in education that's coming. And I'm excited about it.
Absolutely.
I am too. I agree. And you know what is, I mean, like you said, the good thing about unhealthy is that at least it's been diagnosed.
Yes.
A lot of people walking around with some undiagnosed things and situations, and you don't know if you're healthy or not. You're assuming, but at least you know if you can recognize something, then that means if you recognize it, then we can plan and we can, we put a plan in place and we can change it. And like you said, this is definitely impressing upon, a lot more people, probably than it has ever done, the value of the relationship of teachers and parents.
Yes.
Schools and parents. There's been a reason people been hollering about it need to be more than 3 people on the PTO every year. There was a reason for that. People wasn't just saying it because they want y'all to show up for the free pizza. There was a reason for that. It's a reason. This collaboration is important because when kids see that their teacher and their parents are working together, it's less that they can get away with.
And let's be clear, it's always us against them. It's the grown-ups against the kids.
It is.
And we have to be together if we're going to get them where they need to be.
Yeah. Ladies, when I was a principal, I initiated a program called Alternatives to Suspension, where depending on the severity, like you couldn't go knock somebody up the head and you got to go home. However, if it was something that was a suspendable offense, depending upon the severity of the offense, I invited parents. I gave them a choice. I said, hey, I can either suspend little Johnny for 3 days, or you can come in and come sit with your baby for a day and just shadow them. I don't want you to participate in nothing. I ain't gonna ask you to figure out no math problems, nothing like. I just want you to shadow them. Yeah. And that alone, providing parents with the opportunity to just, hey, number one, you ain't got to find a babysitter. You ain't got to find, the baby ain't got to be at home all day. They're not going to miss out on their education. They're not going to fall behind in their work or anything like that. But it helps parents to be able to see exactly, because even though their child might not act up in the class while they're there, guess what? Them other kids are, because that ain't their mom and dad.
That's right.
So now their parent gets to see, oh, you got to deal with that 22 of them? And that's like, it's 22 of them in here. It's like, oh, no wonder. And what we had was that I found parents that were just like, I'm coming back and doing lunch duty next week because this lady needs a break. You know what I'm saying? I didn't realize that, your morning assembly set the tone for the day, that they have an opportunity to, talk if something's wrong or whatever, this and that. They just don't get it. And a lot of times we imagine how school is going to be from a parent perspective based upon our experience with school.
Right.
Like, nah, these kids different. It's different. Right. School is different. School is different.
Yeah. It's completely different. You talking about things happening faster before kids are mature enough for it. I keep telling people 4th and 5th grade is the new middle school.
Yes, ma'am.
4th and 5th graders are middle schoolers now. You understand what I'm saying? Ma'am. They are very different in the building, but our K-3 babies are still babies. And then 4th and 5th grade comes up and it's like, who are these kids? They come in the next year, chests puffed out, they saying things like what? Responding like what? Huh?
Who's talking to?
Girl, were you in 3rd grade last year? Like, so things are really shifting. Or have shifted. Let me not say really shifted. Things have shifted. And like you said, when you haven't been, you're talking about us or, even older parents, you haven't been in school in forever. You would be surprised you walk through the door and you see what's happening in a school, at any level, but definitely just to walk into school, to go in the cafeteria and see what's happening, to be outside of a classroom. I had a parent at my previous school, same school. Her son was just cutting up just as much as he possibly could. And so she told me, and we were in trailers at that time. She told me when she was coming, and she was just going to be looking right outside the window of the trailer, because not only did we have steps, but we had a little like just a little kind of a porch on the side so you could stand up and you could see through. And she stood out there and she watched him for a couple hours. And then she tried to bust through that door. She couldn't bust through it because it's one of them, it's a trailer door. You can't bust in. She shook that door so hard and I opened it and busted in there and scared him and told him that she had been out there for almost an hour watching him cut up. And it just, from that point on, and not that she didn't know, because she was very much aware of this is her grandson. She's very much aware of his situation, but she needed to, like she said, she needed to put eyes on it so that she knew exactly how to deal with it when she got home. She needed to physically see it, not just what I wrote down, not what went home. She needed to put her eyes on it, and she dealt with that baby accordingly.
Yep.
And like you said, it's so important. You're talking about the relationship that we need with our parents and our communities. Also, we have a lot of schools sometimes are sitting in communities and they don't even know the community they're sitting in.
Yep,
that is true.
Yep.
Underserved. Yeah, that whole community. That's a community. I know the kids go there, but I'm talking about what else do you know about the community? That you're serving. What's going on right here. I see one of my friends put a question in here. Really, we'll try to take this really quickly. How do you feel this pandemic is affecting students with disabilities? Well, I know from my perspective as a special education teacher, it varies. I have some students with disabilities that are doing very well. And it's for the reason that I was explaining to Margina before we actually went live today. And it's because a lot of the social nuances have been eliminated by being virtual. So a lot of my students who are lacking in social skills, who have difficulty with peer interactions, that often impact their academics and then shift the whole atmosphere in the classroom, that's gone. Because even though you're on a computer and you can still be silly and you can still be distractible, it's different. It's a different situation. Obviously, this is a very delicate situation with students with disabilities because we have to make sure our students with disabilities are getting exactly what they need in a very unique setting. And some students with disabilities, it requires them to be in person. I don't work with students with severe disabilities. I work with students who have learning disabilities in reading or math or writing, so they need the extra support. And so virtual learning is not necessarily a huge challenge for them. But I don't know, that varies. And I know a lot of families feel very strongly about the students with disabilities being in the building. They are what we are calling the more vulnerable learners in this setting. But again, we're trying to weigh health and safety as a priority with services that are equally important, but trying to see how we can do it to the best of our ability without compromising the safety and health of the students. So that's kind of my short answer. If either one of you want to jump in, you can. And I have one more, our last closing out question, which is just kind of like a fun question.
Well, I would just piggyback on that because having to sit in a lot of IEP meetings, their parents are really struggling with I guess I can say understanding what the IEPs that were developed with them in previous years, how they are supposed to be implemented in this virtual environment. More specifically, I will say that there was a young man who has, or one of my students who has an IEP, who is on the spectrum, but he has a dedicated assistant as part of his services. Now, the purpose for his dedicated assistant is to make sure that he is safe while in the building. However, because we are no longer in the building, and because of what the previous DA did in helping with that student academically, like the parents are just like, what am I supposed to do? Because now they're finding out what their child can truly do on its own.
On their own.
And they are in shock. They were in shock.
Yeah.
So I think and that goes back, Margina put it brilliantly, like the veil of so many things in education is being lifted during this time. Like we are going to have no choice but to make some shifts for some of us, huge paradigm shifts for what education is and will be after this whole thing is over.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of kids, a lot of our students with disabilities, what we've just had to do too is we've had to take another look at these documents that were developed for them, and we've had to adjust for this environment. Now, adjust doesn't mean take things away, but we've had to make some adjustments. You know, students that get read aloud, for example, a very simple accommodation in the building, but you're talking about navigating a read aloud on a virtual setting where you can't necessarily just take that child out of class and read every single thing to them. So that may involve one of my coworkers, Tanisha Johnson, who may still be on here, you know, gave a suggestion of, you know, reading a test to the student and then uploading the version that you read to whatever source you communicate to with parents, Class Dojo, you know, or whatever, you know, but again, we have to find creative ways to still deliver those services because they absolutely need them. But like you said, we are really having to make some changes, and some of the changes I'm really glad of, and I'm hoping that they're going to stick around because some of them were needed. And despite this, and so it's forcing us to do some things we should have done a long time ago, and reevaluate some things that were dead on the table that we just left. Oh, we'll table this discussion, and we left out the room. And now we have to deal with it because it's, you know, here like right in front of us. So thank you for that question. Tanja, she sent that question to me. All right. So this is my kind of fun question. I'm going with the silly one, of course, but in thinking about all the TV shows that mirror school, right? About Saved by the Bell, 21 Jump Street. Well, we got movies, Dangerous Minds, Lean on Me, Matilda, which is one of my favorite movies, although I would not survive with somebody like Miss Crunchable as a principal or whatever. But you know, I just want to know, like, what is one of your favorite movies that mirrors a classroom, a school, or education? And have you had similar experiences to what you saw on the TV show to your actual environment? Margina, we'll go with you first.
I'm gonna comment on two, if that's okay. I went to Saved by the Bell high school. I went to school in Florida. We left right after middle school.
Right after middle school, yep.
Yep. And we actually moved to Mississippi first, but I finished high school. So I went 10th, 11th, 12th grade in Florida, and I went to Bayside High.
Right.
Culturally, I was just like, where am I? Like, who are you people? But it was literally like, you know, not very diverse.
Yeah.
A bunch of affluent kids. You know, and I'm living in the same neighborhood as these children, but you know, I got real mama and daddy, like, you know, this our stuff. You just you borrow it. Right. Not my mentality. Right. At all. So that was one experience. And then definitely Lean on Me. And he hears this a million times, but my hiring person, my mentor, Phil Price, he gets compared to Joe Clark all the time just because he has that same fire inside of him. And he is the type of person that coaches you up like that, where you think that, okay, you really don't like me. You know, Right. But when it comes out in the wash that, you know, the whole time, no, I believed in you. And that's why I'm pushing you. Right. And definitely he is was the catalyst and is the reason why I am where I am today. Because he'll still call and check on me. Like, he hates that I'm a consultant now. He'll be like, you know, you ready to get back in here and help these babies? And I'm like, no.
Yeah. Like, no, I'm doing good right here.
I'm good right here. I may go back, after a while. I think probably after my youngest child is 15, so she graduates in the next 2 years. Probably maybe after that, I think I'll have the time. But for right now, I do need the flexibility to just be a mom.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Shauna, what about you?
I will say that I probably went to Bayside High as well. Except when I think of Bayside, I think it was a little bit more diverse. Like I'm from a military town, so my classmates and my group, my circle of friends was, my dad used to call us the Rainbow Coalition. It was some of everybody. And we definitely, like the relationship they had with their principal, like we had that kind of relationship with our principals and teachers as well. Yeah. So I thought that was probably the best analogy there. I will say that oh, that's so funny, because Joe Clark was actually a woman for me.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Dynamic.
Oh my gosh, yes. This woman was probably one of the most, I would say, powerful in just the way that she ran the school and the way she handled herself and the way she dealt with us and the kids. We knew it was always in love. Now, we didn't have to guess about that. We knew she loved us, but she had zero cut cards. None. With us, with the kids, with their parents, with anybody. She always called a thing a thing. And I will forever be appreciative of her for that, because and I just remember one of my times, like the kids, like really, I was dealing with 6th graders and they really irritated me, like for 2 days.
6th graders do.
They want some different stuff, and I just decided I just wasn't gonna talk to them. Like they came in and all of that stuff was on the board, and I was just like, "Don't talk to me, just sit there." And then something happened. I don't know. I was like, "Y'all are really pissing me off today." And I get a call into her office at the end of the day. Now, Miss Berry, I know they probably upset you, and I know it takes a lot to upset you. However, ma'am, you will not be using those words in front of my children. I said, okay. Point taken. Never again will I say that.
Right.
I'll be creative and find a different way to say it.
Right.
But yeah, so that was definitely kind of East Side High-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lean on Me is obviously, it's just a lot of people's favorite movies, but it's one of my favorite movies because it's just, obviously it's a great story. And it's a story that even if we didn't go to a high school, like that we all identify with, when kids are counted out and, mistreated and, undervalued or whatever. And then the Joe Clarks come in, or changing everything for the good, but come sweeping in super harsh, I think for me, I know in my current situation, Recess is more what's going on with me. Recess is such a funny cartoon for me. I love Recess. I have loved Recess for as long as Recess has been out. I got my kids recently watching because they too young for Recess, right? But I put them on it, and Recess from the perspective of the kids is what I feel like I'm really in. Like the kindergartners are always off doing the most, okay? The most. But then you got the 4th and the 5th graders that are already like middle schoolers, so it's really, really funny. And Margina, this is so funny. Do you remember Miss Cousineau? And
of course I remember Miss Cousineau.
Miss Cousineau is like Miss Fenster. Like she looks like she reminds me of her. Listen, I love Recess. It gives me nostalgia. It takes me back to middle school, and it's where I am now.
I ain't thought about Miss Cousineau in I don't know How long?
Probably forever. When I first started watching that show, I kept saying, this lady reminds me of somebody from middle school. I couldn't think of her name. And then I finally said, science.
Yep.
And then just after that, I just fell in love all over again. So absolutely.
Real quick sidebar. Do you remember our 8th grade math teacher, the guy who used to spit, the man who used to spit all the time? He used to spit when he was teaching.
Oh, when he was talking.
And when he was talking. So if you want to ask him for help, because he was always spitting on you.
Yes.
So when you said Miss Cousin now, you reminded me, I can't think of his name, but he had gray hair.
Oh, I can't think of his name either. If anybody on here from Oak Park,
his breath stank and he spit all the time.
Oh man, that was terrible. That's a terrible combination too.
Horrible combination.
If you on here from Oak Park, I think AJ. Who remembers that teacher's name? We gonna go figure that out on Oak Park page. I know somebody knows it. I know somebody.
They know. Second floor.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, listen, ladies, this has been excellent. I really want to first of all, I want to thank both of you for joining. I'm sorry Sherelle couldn't join us. She had a last minute change and she had to go do something, step in for someone who had been exposed to COVID. So she's helping out so that person can quarantine. But I thank both of you for joining today and for sharing your experiences. And I know that every time I do this, my eyes are open, more and more to what all of our different experiences are, but especially in education, because this is where I am now. And I'm always thinking about what's next, even if I'm not actually putting it in action yet. I'll get there. But, I'm thinking about what's next. This is my 13th year in special education. I'm going on 14. And so, I'm trying to expand myself. I'm trying to think, what else do I want to do? Where else do I want to go? And I appreciate being able to sit and have these conversations, but not just with you all, but with other people, and we can engage. And so let's face it, teachers, we don't always get this. We don't always get this opportunity. Sometimes the opportunity for us to do things like this is put together for us and it's contrived, which means it's not really natural. So we don't really let our guard down as much as we possibly can. And we always have to be on our P's and Q's, which we are always on anyway, because of our jobs and agreements and things like that. But being able to talk through things and ask questions and engage, it really does help. It helps me, but it helps all of us see a different perspective on different things. So I appreciate both of you taking the time out on this Saturday in November, in the middle of the pandemic, or in the beginning. I don't know where we are in the pandemic anymore. Are we starting over? It look like we're starting over. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, where we're going to go. But I do really hope and pray, number one, that people have a better appreciation for educators in general. I am happy that we are finally going to have people around again that understand the educational world and that will help bring the appreciation and awareness to all the work that teachers do. I think people forget that everybody had a teacher. I think people think they just went from being a baby to doing whatever they're doing. Everyone had a teacher, and every one of us has a teacher that we can think of right now that inspired us, and then another one that probably almost broke us down or did break us down. But the reality is teachers stick with us no matter what the impression was. And so we have to make sure that we do right by teachers financially. We have to do right by teachers and valuing and respecting, bringing teachers into conversations and tables to make decisions instead of just rolling the decisions down to them and asking them to just do it. Yeah. I mean, so I'm hoping and praying that is what is happening as well. I know some of the negatives can be loud, but I really don't believe those negatives overpower the people who do appreciate educators. and educators all around. The principals are educators, assistant principals, consultants, ITCs, all of those people, they are all pieces that, you know, make education what it is. We couldn't do it just by ourselves. So I really do appreciate you guys being on, and thank you everybody on Facebook for joining us. This will be on my YouTube channel. So Jamila Gall is my YouTube channel if you want to go subscribe to it. But all of these series will be there as well. I know it's kind of hard to scroll through Facebook and find the old ones. So they'll be archived, and it'll be easier access, and it'll be, you know, better set up on YouTube very soon. Very soon. So yes, absolutely.
And it was good meeting you, Shauna.
Yeah,
it was very good to meet you. A matter of fact, we might need to talk.
Yeah, listen, everybody that I have put together, I'm telling you, we left these, and I'm like, these people seem like they've known each other for years. We're just going back and forth and taking words out of each other's mouths, and I guess
that's because of you, Madam.
Well, thank you. That's the beauty of the discussion. And I really do enjoy it. So thank you guys so much. And I appreciate it over and over again. I can have a million educators on here because I know so many educators. And I promise when I get through these series, I have my series mapped out all the way through next year. You know, I'm gonna have to double back and come back again on certain subjects because there's some people I missed or they weren't available. I didn't have the opportunity. But we could be doing this till the cows come home because there's more to talk about in education than just what we covered today. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, you all have a good evening. Thank you again so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Y'all have a good weekend.
Bye. You too. Bye-bye.